Hi, everybody. It is MA again. I thought it would be fun to join in on the conversations about deck collecting that was started by Imogen over at Sapling Tarot, and I've been watching people's VRs. So here we are. I was going to do this camera facing, but I'll be honest, I usually film a lot, mostly earlier in the morning, and I'm a little scruffy, so instead I'm giving you glitter nails today. Yeah, so let's get into these questions. So the first question is, how long have you been collecting decks? So my first deck that I got, and I was a late starter. I know I've mentioned this before if you've ever watched my channel. I picked up a, the Starback Universal Weight deck when, in 2017, where I was already a full-grown adult. And I carried it around. I looked at the pictures when I would go for a walk. I was using it for writing, and I wasn't really studying. I got overwhelmed immediately saying, I thought, I couldn't memorize things. So I had this one deck that was kind of like a companion, but I wasn't really seriously studying tarot. And then the second deck I bought when it came out was the Literary Witches Oracle. I had no idea what to do with this, but I bought it because of the writing connection. I ended up eventually doing the modification. I think Dawn Michelle had done this, where the object cards were cut down to tiny cards. And I really primarily bought this for its association with the authors. I mean, an Anne Carson card. Come on, where else are you going to find that? An Audre Lorde card. So that was it for years and years and years and years. I think I maybe picked up one or two, maybe one other deck. And then something happened. And there were two things that happened at the same time. One is I started actually studying tarot through YouTube, and I was following along with videos that were showing multiple decks as examples of how reading the different aspects of a card. But the other thing that happened, which I haven't heard anyone actually say the word during their VRs yet, is COVID happened. And I was home. I was spending a lot of time studying tarot. It was perfect time. I was very fortunate in that I kept my job, so I didn't, experience a sudden hardship of loss of employment. I wasn't having to drive to work, buy lunch at work, the whole thing. And I started buying decks, to be quite honest. A lot of it, I started doing some Kickstarters, and I really felt good about that as a way to support some people. There was, the heyday, I think, at least for me, of some really good stuff coming out on the indie space in 20 and 21 and 22. And then there was kind of the, I don't know, dopamine or whichever brain chemical rush of, I'm getting a package today. So I did order a bunch of mass market stuff because I felt like getting stuff in the mail. And I just want to be really honest about that. Is that what kind of kicked off a lot of it? There were a lot of mistakes made, and plenty of those decks I don't have anymore, but that's really what kind of kicked in, was the combination of more intense actual tarot study and learning with having time on my hands. Yeah, and the income. So there we are. That's how that started. Question number 2, what kind of collection do I have? It is definitely an eclectic collection. I think the thing I now value the most is, or that I seek out the most before I add anything else, usually, is who created this and how was it created. And that's, I think, the thing that's most important to me. I do not have a cohesive aesthetic at all. The irony is, of course, being someone who's involved with writing, I also find that language can be a cage. And once I define an aesthetic, I don't know what that does to my brain consciousness. It feels like it shuts things out that I might be attracted to. And so I just kind of go with it. It doesn't mean everything works out. Plenty of things I release after I've tested them out, but that's kind of how I roll. Yeah, my collection is cohesive in its eclecticism. So there we go. Number 3, am I a completionist? No. As a matter of fact, that's something that terrifies me. I think Imogen in the original video talked about the whole Seasons of the Witch thing. And if I get one, I'm going to have to get them all. Yeah, I'm not really attracted to that at all. I will say I believe I am a loyalist. So if I have a deck by someone and they have something coming out, I will check it out and see if it's something that would fit, or if it fills a gap, or if I just really want it. I think there's a couple of exceptions where I am completist with people's work, and honestly, it's because they haven't created that much. So Cedar at Numinous Press has put out 3 decks, and I have all 3 of them. This was the Oracle, the Uncertain Oracle. And yeah, I think I always will look into what's coming out next from someone whose work I love using and having and holding and looking at. But I don't want to feel compelled. And if I started to feel compelled, I would be really uncomfortable. So that's how we roll with that. Completionism. How do I store and organize my decks? So I'm going to try to get the thumbnail for this to show where my decks are. But I did the math today. I got out the tape measure. I have about 100 and change. I'm going to say it's like around 120, 115, 120 decks stored in what turns out to be 2 square feet of floor space. I have 2 very small bookshelves. And when you open the door into my space, the door actually blocks the shelves, so I can't see them. I don't keep the decks in the zone where I do the readings, and in some case I'm doing my readings mostly in another room entirely. And what that has done for me is it's cutting down for me on the noise of decks vying for my attention. So I'll take a few things off the shelf and I'll work with them until I either feel done or I want to switch things up, and I'm not in the same room and space as all the other decks that I'm not using. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that has worked out great for me over the last year or so. I'm kind of glad that I did that. So yeah, they're taking up their own zone, and it's almost like they're in a non-magical space, and then when I take them out, they get to go somewhere magical with me. I don't know if that makes sense. Okay. Number 5, what is my favorite thing about the collection or about collecting? So in general, I am not someone who has the collector gene in terms of needing to have multiples of the same thing. Like, you're not going to come in my house and find that I collected, I don't know, 175 souvenir teaspoons from different amusement parks in 1942, anything like that. Like, so this whole tarot collection thing is an anomaly for me. And actually, to be honest, the same thing kind of happened with fountain pens and inks during that same time period. But what I do like it, first of all, I do like that I stepped out of a personal box. I broke down an identity that says I am not a collector type person. Well, okay, so now I am. I like touching the decks. I mean, I like the tactile experience. I grew up with people that played cards a lot. So to me, like, having a deck of cards in my hand feels very cozy and natural. I like the variety. My collection is kind of all over the place. And I love that I gave myself permission to follow an interest, to, like I said, that I busted down the I'm not a collector type person door and allowed myself to crave something and follow through on it. So I think that's what I like about it. What is my least favorite or something to improve? So I do have some decks that I think are special purpose decks or limited use decks, or that I bought for a specific purpose. In some cases, they are some of these aspirational self type of decks. And I think I'd like to get better about sectioning some of those off. There's some that I have that I say, I'm going to use this for writing, but they're mixed in with all those other decks behind the door. So yeah, that's what I'd like to do, is partition off the decks, maybe put them in a separate basket, so I would reach for those things more often. There's some where I say, oh, I'm going to use this for meditation or altar cards. And I haven't been very good about that. So that's about it. Okay, number 7. What is the biggest category? So I have data. Of course I have data. So tarot out, well, I'll just give you the numbers because I don't want to do the math. So tarot, it's not quite 3 to 1, but there's 79 tarot decks and 36 oracle decks. The tarot pile is more indie than mass market, and the oracle pile is almost exactly 50-50. My tarot decks are mostly RWS adjacent, but then when I started, or I thought so, and then when I looked, there's about 6 Thothi decks, 3 that I would say are actually Marseille. But then when I went through and saw how many were Pippi decks, it's like 25, more than I thought. And then a bunch of these are kind of off in their own world decks that what even is it, right? So even that in the tarot space. And in the oracle, I think my oracle collection is pretty consistent. They're mostly images with keywords, or a couple of keywords. I don't have a lot of things with a lot of text on them, with a few exceptions. Yeah, so that is what we have happening there. The smallest category, question number 8, is Lenormand. I have 1 deck, and that's one of my aspirational self things. I once in a while, I say that is going to happen, and I just only have a certain number of hours in the day, and I guess that is a frustration of mine. Question number 9, do I have a Holy Grail in my collection? I have some that were not grails exactly when I got them, although the Vampire Tarot, the Robert M. Place deck, as soon as I saw it, I did start to try to hunt down a copy, and I was able to get one from someone selling theirs at a very reasonable price at the time. I think one card has a little crease in it, and it had already been modified so that the corners were trimmed. And honestly, for me, that was a good thing, because that means I use that deck without concern that I'm ruining it. You know, I've read the book and marked it and cracked the spine. So I'm not treating that as a collectible deck, which is great. At the time that I bought the Tarot of the Crone, it just happened to be open for orders. I don't know that it ever will be again, and that is definitely one that if anything happened to my copy of that, I would probably hunt to the ends of the earth to replace it. And a couple of others that are oracles, surprisingly, is this little, something that I bought on Etsy from what was known as Redfish Tarot, and it now seems to be disappeared, but it's this little Modern Mary Oracle. I bought this to work with the Mother Tarot, and it had to do with things going on with my mother at the time. But now I use this with the Spirit Keepers Tarot, and I would be very sad if I could not have those two be friends anymore if anything happened to this deck. And I don't have a Mary practice. It's just I would probably track this thing down. So this to me is now a Grail deck. I also have decks in my collection that are probably other people's Grail decks, but that's a whole different story. And then, a funny thing is mass markets go out of print. I think US Games took this out of production recently, and I think I would hunt down a copy of this because, I don't know, it's just an old friend at this point, even though, is this TMI? The way I have used this for years is I keep it in my bathroom and, pull a card, and it sits in a card holder on the back of the toilet tank. But I would feel very sad if I didn't have it anymore, and that's one I would hunt down. I would hunt down another copy of this. Yeah. So whether that makes that Grail decks or not, I'm not sure, but yeah, that's where we are with that. Question 10. Do I ever wish my collection were bigger or smaller? Sometimes I do get overwhelmed sometimes. It seems like a lot, especially if I stop and think and go, oh, I haven't used that deck in 2 years, or I haven't read with that more than once this year. I do get overwhelmed over the course of my heaviest collecting, which is over the last 5 years or so. I've probably given away about 40 decks. Yeah. I have a friend I've given a lot to. Every once in a while, I just hand over some decks, and I do have a few in storage where I probably will try to sell them eventually because they're indie and out of print. And then I have another small box I keep in the trunk of my car that has a few more that I'm just willing to hand over and give away at some point. And I had more than that in a purgatory box, and I went back and shopped the collection and took things back out that when I did get overwhelmed, I pared everything down to maybe 50 decks, but I didn't get rid of anything. And then I went back and took another 40 back out, and then I gave a bunch away. So it fluctuates. It's more about my brain than the collection itself. Question 11, how often do I declutter? I think I just maybe answered that. I mean, I did a big culling several years ago. So I think I'm on the other side of that. Last year, because life, I checked and I brought in 24 decks last year. A lot of them were kind of impulsive. I don't think I will keep them all. There were a lot of mass markets, and they were all pretty good. It's just there's a lot of them, and I will probably let some go in one way or another. So I will probably do another smaller release, but I'm not going to rush it. Like I said, everything's sitting in 2 square feet in a space where they're not screaming at me. So we'll see what happens with there. Number 12, am I ever envious of other people's collections? Not really, except I do kind of envy the people that are able to have a laser focus as far as, the purpose of each deck. And even though I'm saying for myself, like, I don't want to just find an aesthetic, some people's collections just seem such a beautiful capsule. But on the other hand, I know that's not me. I have ADHD tendencies and all kinds of things like that. And I know that's not me. I can be a little impulsive, and the things that I love about my collection very much outweigh any need to have that laser focus. Number 13, who has the best collection videos? I'm going to be honest, I haven't watched those in quite a while. I was mostly off YouTube for almost a year, so I haven't been watching a lot of deck-related hashtags even, or collection videos. So I'm not really sure. I think I'm feeling like I could watch some more now and see how I feel about that. I do love finding out about decks that I didn't know about, especially older releases that I had never heard of. So I do find them fun, and I don't, at this point, feel like it's too much temptation for me. I mentioned this repeatedly, but I love Julie's idea from Peekaboo Rose about the retail temptations list, and I do write the things down and revisit them later, and sometimes either purchase something or take things off the list and go, no. So yeah, I feel like I'm in a place where I can watch collection videos if I have the time, and I like to feel happy for people. Honestly, that's the thing I like about collection videos, is when the people have so much joy about their decks. Yeah, because I think that's one of the things we're here to share, right? The happiness. Cool. Okay, number 14, some advice for new collectors. Oh boy, here's the thing. You're going to make mistakes. So I'm not going to tell you, it's so easy now for me to say, don't get too many decks at once, don't buy it because someone else did. But I think the best thing is have some grace for yourself. You're going to make errors. And for me, the best thing I did was to learn from my mistakes and stop and say, either why isn't this deck working for me? Why don't I like it? Why did I get it in the first place? And then going forward, I make much less of those errors. Now, I have strayed. Last year was, the year of impulse buys, and I had a bunch of Barnes and Noble gift cards for my credit card points, so I was just shoving things in the cart. But I have learned from, I think, anytime you do a culling or a review, I think one thing that new collectors should be aware of is that decks are really hard to get rid of unless you have some rare out of print desirable thing. And by the way, that desirability fluctuates with time and fashion and whatever. Decks are really hard to get rid of. So if you bring in 15 mass market decks and you decide you don't like them, you might as well put them on the side of the road, because by the time you pay for shipping as a retail human to get them to someone, like it's not easy to offload them. So that's just kind of a word of caution. And I think and I would also say don't get rid of things too fast. I'm very happy that I put some boxes aside for a time and then went back to visit them, because they kind of fell into 3 categories at the end of things, in some less than obvious ways, which I discovered. One of them is, I like this, but I can't read with it, right? So I kind of had piles of those, but then that single pile turned into 2 different solutions. One of them was, I have discovered the reason why I'm not able to enjoy reading with this deck, and I'm never going to get over that, and so it's going to go. But the other thing was, I'm not able to read with this deck yet. And there were several decks that I had put away that I thought I was going to get rid of, and I just needed time. So for example, some of the things that didn't work for me, and these are great decks, and I gave them new homes, but I had this Super Linares Tarot from the original Kickstarter. Great deck, Rider-Waite, photo collage. It turns out I don't really do well with photos of people that look too much like real people. Especially there were a couple of, faces in that deck that looked like either people I knew or celebrities. There was one card that looked like a chef that had a show on the Food Network, and I thought he was kind of a dick. So I'm like, okay, no, I never want the 9 of Cups. So silly reasons like that. It had to go. Similar reason with the Hidden Realm. I was testing myself with that, about working with things that were more human face-based of emotions. There were a couple of cards in there that looked like people I knew, and it just didn't work for me. I handed both of those to a friend, and that's something I now know about myself. If things are photographs or too realistically depicting contemporary faces, I have to watch the walkthroughs and be very cautious. And there's a few other categories like that. So there were those categories, but then there was another category called I just hate this. And that was the most embarrassing category for me. There were a few where I'm like, oh my God, why did I do this? And then of course I had to beat myself up. So again, be kind to yourself. You will make mistakes, and find out what does and doesn't work for you. There are some gorgeous decks that I just know it's not the thing that complements the way my vision and my brain and my intuition and my, thinking work together. And, I gave a friend the Tarot of the Abyss. I think Anna Torian is so talented, but there's something about that kind of line work in a deck art that is a very much a struggle for me. There was another one too. Oh, curated art decks. I love them. They're so gorgeous. But I struggle with them. Yeah. I don't know why, but I don't need to know why, right? I just kind of wait and see if anything like that is going to work for me, but I don't go on repeat with pulling them in. So that's okay. Let me boil that down. Some advice: you will make mistakes. Use those mistakes to learn more about yourself. And then number three, be flexible, because what you just learned about yourself might change over time or tomorrow. Yeah. So that's about it. Cool. Thanks to Sapling Tarot for starting this conversation. And yeah, happy taroting, everybody. Bye.